to Crime and Court. My name is Heather. This is another episode of Innocence Lost, which is my Wrongful Conviction Series, and today we're going to be discussing Dennis Fritz and Ron Williamson. And the title of this is False Confessions, Jailhouse Snitches, and Flawed Testing. If that doesn't give you a clue about what we're going to be talking about, I don't know what would help you. All right, so dogs barking. Give me 1 second. All right, that took like 5 or 6 more barks before she shut up. All right. So we're going to be talking about Dennis Fritz and Ron Williamson. So their case is connected. So let's first shrink me back and discuss Dennis Fritz. So this is Dennis Fritz, as you can see from the image on the screen. This is Ron Williamson. So let's start with Dennis Fritz, who was along with his co-defendant Ron Williamson, was convicted in the 1988 homicide of Deborah Sue Carter. Her body had been found 6 years earlier. Fritz was sentenced to life in prison, and Williamson was sent to the DR. He got the DP. Can't say certain words that aren't very friendly to YouTube, so I apologize for the censoring, but it's not by my design. All right, so the 21-year-old victim, so that's Deborah Sue, just so she doesn't get lost, Deborah Sue Carter. The 21-year-old victim had left her waitressing job and was found and her life had been taken in her apartment the following day. Fritz and Williamson were known to frequent the establishment where the victim worked. The prosecution presented evidence that the victim had previously complained to a friend that they, quote, made her nervous. Williamson had been seen at the restaurant the night of the homicide without Fritz. Fritz was not charged until 5 years after the homicide, delayed by state exhumation of the victim. This thing keeps flickering for no reason. Stop it, please. All right. Like, I can't even breathe, or the thing just flickers on me. All right. Sorry. Fritz was not charged until 5 years after the homicide, and that was delayed by state exhumation of the victim after an incorrect analysis of fingerprints at the scene was noted. So, if incorrect analysis had been done on fingerprints, what makes us trust anything else that they're going to do? It was so bad of a screw up that they had to exhume the body. That's pretty bad. An inmate that Fritz was paired with eventually came forward and stated that Fritz had confessed to the homicide. This jailhouse snitch gave a 2-hour taped interview revealing what Fritz had allegedly confessed to him. 2 hours. The confession came one day before the prosecution would have been forced to drop the charges against Fritz. And that, my friends, is prosecutorial misconduct. A prosecutor probably who was presiding over another inmate's case, probably went to them and said, hey, I can get you some leniency on your sentencing if you help me out here and be a jailhouse snitch for Fritz so that I don't have to drop my charges on him. That is exactly what that looks like to me. Another informant testified that she had heard Williamson threaten to harm his mother as he had, in the same way, I guess, as the victim, as he threatened the victim. So Williamson was also seen at the bar the night of the homicide, according to a witness named Glenn Gore. Remember him. Additionally, police had statements from Williamson regarding a dream he had about the crime. Forensic testing was performed on various items of evidence, and Analysts testified that 11 hairs, um, private hairs, and 2 head hairs from the crime scene were consistent with Fritz's hair. That means they match if you want it in one word. The analyst testified. That is impossible. It's impossible to conclusively match hair samples. And to say that it is a match just because they were consistent doesn't mean that they are a match. So that's very, very incorrect what the analyst testified to. And this is what analysts have been doing since DNA has been around, and these forensic testings or forensics has been around. But we're learning now that there's things we didn't know. Like, for instance, in my last Innocence Lost video, I played it was like a 10-minute TED talk we went through with Ruth Morgan, who talked about the fact that you shed DNA everywhere. You leave a piece of you behind everywhere you go. You can shake one person's hand, and 3 hands later that shook that same hand will have your DNA on it. So there's still so much we don't know about what we're conclusively testifying to, saying, yep, that's a match, put him away for life, or take his life because these hairs look consistent. I need more than that to put someone on the DP. I wouldn't want to ever put anybody on the DP, but if I had to, I would need a whole lot more than these hairs kind of looked the same. Anyways. Because there is not adequate empirical data on the frequency of various class characteristics in human hair, it is impossible to say definitively that strands of hair match. The analyst also tested evidence from the crime scene and testified that he did not detect certain group substances, meaning the result was consistent with a non-secretor. So Fritz, Williamson, and the victim were all non-secretors, but we all know now that non-secretor and secretor really doesn't mean anything. The analyst testified incorrectly that this result meant the perpetrator was a non-secretor. No potential evidence from a donor was collected that could be excluded. However, because the victim's group markers could be masking the perpetrators. Under such circumstances, the failure to inform the jury that 100% of the male population could be included and that none could be excluded is highly misleading. And I would say not just misleading, but it would not be necessarily factual. You'd be potentially, as you're testifying to it, holding back that information might be part of obfuscation of justice or something by not telling the whole truth, I think. And these people don't ever get any kind of consequences, is the word I'm looking for, consequences for misidentifying somebody with DNA. The analysts aren't required to, be right all the time. They just do their job. Same with, I mean, they do have testing and things like that, but at some point you got to look at, you know, there have been many cases, Stephen Avery, for instance, where the procedures in the crime lab might be skewed or even biased or tainted, and the people that work there might not be getting the exact training that they need and the updated technology that they need, and there's all sorts of things that factor into that. So it's a big problem. All right, so Fritz could not remember his exact whereabouts during the day of the crime due to the amount of time which was 5 years that had passed. So you're supposed to remember where you were 5 years ago on a specific day. What? Like today, 5 years ago today, as you're watching this, do you have any clue what you were doing 5 years ago? Probably not, unless it's a significant anniversary or something to you. You probably do not know. So, two men were convicted. Fritz was sentenced to life, Williamson to the DP. So this is where the story's gonna split up. So let's backtrack to Ron Williamson. And just as an FYI, Ron Williamson grew up in Ada, Oklahoma, and was the youngest of three children, his parents' only son. A talented baseball player, he was the 41st pick. Hold on. Dog keeps walking around. All right, so he was the 41st pick in baseball's 1971 amateur draft. Unfortunately, a shoulder injury ruined his career, and Williamson returned home in the late 1970s. So it doesn't seem like he ever went anywhere because of uh, timing. He was home in the late 70s. So okay, so he was in for a while. He was in the major leagues, I'm assuming. Doesn't say, but I'm assuming major leagues. All right, so we read all of this. So where was I supposed to start? All right, so Williamson and Fritz were not charged until 5 years after the homicide. The charge was delayed by the state exhumation of the victim up after an incorrect analysis of fingerprints at the scene. An inmate that Fritz was paired with eventually came forward and stated that Fritz had confessed to I can't say that word, to the homicide. This confession came one day before the prosecution would have been forced to drop the charges. Another inmate or informant, okay, we read all this. He allegedly told police. Additionally, police said that Williamson told them he had a dream about committing the crime. He allegedly told police that he dreamed that he had stabbed and strangled the victim. This statement was treated as a confession. There's a whole lot of problem with that, but okay. So forensic testing was performed on the hairs. There were 17 hairs that were recovered that were a match to both Fritz and Williamson, though we now know that this type of hair analysis is not a validated forensic science practice. Furthermore, the other evidence found at the scene was subjected to blood testing, and the results suggested that the perpetrators were non-secretors, and both Fritz and Williamson are non-secretors. So, false information. All right, so Williamson was sent to the DR, and Fritz, life in prison, post-conviction investigation. After their convictions, Fritz and Williamson filed separate appeals. Upon the denial of his claim, Fritz contacted the Innocence Project and learned that Williamson's lawyers were planning to test the physical evidence. The Innocence Project filed an injunction to make sure that the cases were joined with regard to DNA testing and were granted testing in 1998. So that's kind of a key point, to make sure that they were joined so that if one gets exonerated, and the other one does too, like if it points to somebody else, meaning, if somebody else committed it and neither one of them could be included in the results, then you got to let them both out. So the Innocence Project filed an injunction. The cases were joined in 1998. The test results proved conclusively that neither Fritz nor Williamson was the source of the sample that they found, and that none of the matched hairs belonged to them. Further testing of the evidence. Sorry about that. My dogs all decided to just jump up and run down the stairs, and as you know, they're loud. All right, so the test results proved conclusively that neither Fritz nor Williamson was the source of the evidence found, and that none of them matched the hairs that belonged or none of them matched the hairs that were at the scene. Further testing of the evidence matched to Glenn Gore, the witness that the state used to prosecute them. Williamson and Fritz were released and exonerated in April 1999 after spending 11 years in prison for a crime they did not commit. Williamson had at one point come within 5 days of execution. All right, so let's hop back to Fritz's appeals, which were all denied. He later contacted the Innocence Project for help. It was learned that the physical evidence was going to be tested due to appeals filed by Ron Williamson's lawyers. Fritz filed an injunction to make sure that the evidence would not be totally consumed until the cases were joined with regard to the DNA testing. DNA testing revealed that neither Fritz nor Williamson deposited the evidence found on the victim. Further testing proved that none of the many hairs that were labeled matches belonged to them. The profile obtained from the evidence matched Glenn Gore, one of the state's witnesses at trial. Gore escaped from work release shortly after testing was concluded, but was later apprehended. Dennis Fritz and Ron Williamson were exonerated and released in April 1999. Williamson had at one point come within 5 days of execution. The two had been wrongfully incarcerated respectively for 11 years. Both of them spent the same amount of time. Let's hop back over to Ron Williamson. Life after exoneration. Soon after the release, Williamson and Fritz visited New York where they took a tour of Yankee Stadium. Williamson said he just got a taste of how much fun they were having up here. That was a quote, sorry. So Williamson and Fritz filed a civil lawsuit against the Pontotoc County, that's how I'm going to say it, against the Pontotoc County District Attorneys and others, which was settled for an undisclosed amount of money. Sadly, on December 4th, 2004, Williamson died in an Oklahoma nursing home surrounded by his family. He had recently been diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. He was 51 years old. Cirrhosis of the liver is cancer of the liver and often comes with heavy drinking. So I imagine there might have been some psychological issues at hand after being wrongfully convicted for 11 years. You might want to numb the pain, numb that part of you that is still in a trauma state. So, I don't judge. I'm not judging, and neither should you. That's choices. If that's what I don't even know if that's the case. People can get cirrhosis of the liver even without drinking. So I'm not saying that that's what it's from, but it's just a common cancer that people get when they drink a lot. So Williamson and Fritz's case is the subject for John Grisham's first nonfiction book, The Innocent Man, Homicide and Injustice in a Small Town. That's the M word. Actually, not homicide, but I swap it out. Which was published in 2006, and it was a bestseller. The Innocent Man, M, and Injustice in a Small Town, if you're looking for that John Grisham book. And that, my friends, is the story of Ron Williamson and Dennis Fritz. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's always sad to go through these, but it's important that we are socially aware that this is going on. It has been going on for probably all of society, wrongfully convicted individuals, people losing their life for a crime that they didn't commit. It's been going on for centuries on this earth and who knows other universes. Um, but seriously, it is something that is near and dear to me because it just it breaks my heart that these people had to suffer the injustices of the justice system, and um, there's so little you can do to overturn a conviction. It is so hard, difficult to overturn a conviction. So when it is done, when organizations like Innocence Project gets involved and helps to free innocent people, it is almost a miracle. So just be glad that you have your friends and family nearby, that you do, and give them a kiss or a hug and let them know you love them. So take care and don't forget to hit the like button on your way out. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.
If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeandcourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.